Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasahami. So Ajahn Nisabo and I are taking turns coming in. As you may have guessed, we're on a period of about 7 to 8 week retreat. So doing more formal meditation and then just taking turns coming in on these Saturdays. And so the last time I was here was, I think, 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to talk about happiness, but I ended up talking about suffering. I ended up talking a lot about dukkha, what we call in Pali, or the Buddha's language, dukkha, or that which is unsatisfactory. And we recorded the talk, and the name that we gave to that talk was that it was when the sit, i.e. the meditation sit, when the meditation session, when the sit hits the fan. When the sit hits the fan. So that's all about dukkha. But this week, it's going to be all about when this sit is the bomb, when this sit is awesome, when things are going well, when there is pleasure and happiness, piti, sukha, pamoja. There are all sorts of words in the Buddha's language for different levels of happiness, different levels of well-being. So the first noble truth is there is dukkha. There is dukkha. And we're really fortunate. It's great that the Buddha could start with something so real, so realistic. You know, someone comes to a meditation sit or they come to a Buddhist class, and if they're depressed and, you know, someone's trying to teach, you know, all about the heights and all the pleasures of meditation, it just doesn't, you know, you can't swallow it sometimes. You know, if you're just not experiencing any of the well-being in your life, just only talking about pleasure and happiness and think pink and pink clouds, it just doesn't work. So we're fortunate that the Buddha was real enough to say, first noble truth, there is dukkha, there is that which is unsatisfactory. And the more calm and refined and subtle the mind gets, the more calm and subtle and refined our sense of dukkha becomes. It's not that dukkha will be with us, you know, until we attain jhāna and a completely transcended all mental dukkha. There'll be some form of mental unsatisfactoriness with us the whole route. But fortunately, it just gets more and more subtle, and we become more and more skilled at being able to tap into different types of pleasure, different types of sukha. So this is the opposite of dukkha. And the Buddha said, there's a discourse called the Arana Vibhanga, or the discourse on non-conflict, where the Buddha said, you should know how to define happiness, know how to define sukha, know how to define pleasure. And having known how to define sukha, pleasure, you should pursue sukha internally. You should pursue happiness and pleasure, even pleasure internally. So what I thought to do today was start off by giving just a little bit of a taxonomy, or just a schema for ways of thinking and talking about the different types of sukha, the different types of happiness that are spoken about in the Buddha's discourses, and then to ask a provocative and consequential question. But we'll start off with the taxonomy. So in this, you can conceive of it as a 5-element taxonomy of pleasure. And this is a rather modern take, modern in the senses that I just made it up in the last week when I was supposed to be meditating. But anyway, I think it is really useful. So in Buddhism, you often hear talk about 4 and sometimes 5 elements. So the 5 elements are fire or heat, you have air, You have space, you have water, and you have earth. And when we're talking about the physical world, that's the sense of heat, fire, the sense of air or movement, the sense of space, the sense of water or liquidity, and earth, the sense of solidity. And how I was able to remember those is if you ever watch the Planeteers, it's like the different rings. You've got the sukha of fire, the pleasures which are like fire, which are sensual pleasures. And the Buddha said, there are these sensual pleasures, that which is wished for, desired, agreeable, desirable, and provocative of lust, that come up with regards to sight, sound, smells, taste, touch. So these are sense pleasures. And the Buddha equated these with fire. He said most people, most beings are obsessed and devoured with sensual craving and obsessed with sensual fever, the heat of sensual gratification, just obsessing over that. So that's the heat, the sukha of fire. And the Buddha actually said that this type of fire, or this type of sensuality, this type of pleasure or happiness, is not to be developed, not to be cultivated, not to be pursued, not to be developed. So when you first come to Buddhism, that might seem a little bit depressing, because for a lot of us, that's where else we get our pleasure than from the sight, sound, smells, taste, touch of the world, the beautiful sights in the world, the melodious sounds of the world, the fragrant odors, the delicious tastes, the soft and gentle touches of the world. And the Buddha said, watch out, this pleasure can be like fire. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the Buddha didn't just end it right there. It's not like there is this pleasure which is not to be developed, which is actually, you should be kind of wary of this fire-based pleasure. But that's not the end of the story. We've got all these other types of pleasure which are to be developed, are to be cultivated, are to be leaned into. So we've got the pleasure, the sukha of air, like sukhas of fresh air. These are pretty much most of the highest blessings that we chanted before we started to meditate. So these are the pleasures of generosity. It feels good. There's a pleasure that comes from being able to give up. It feels like fresh air rather than the heat of trying to keep and trying to be secretive and just hold everything so tight, all the tightness of grasping. We can let go. We can be generous. It's the fresh air, the happiness, the pleasure of fresh air that comes from having a sense of virtue or inner integrity when we don't have to feed off of the world. For the most part, when we don't have any higher forms of pleasure, we're just feeding off of sensual gratification. We're just feeding off of our relationships, feeding off of the next meal or the next high or the next hit or whatever it is. That's the fiery pleasure. But here we've got all these other types of fresh air pleasures, the fresh air pleasures of just letting go, supporting those of wholesome ways, associating with the wise, living in places of suitable kinds, guided by the rightful way, protecting mother and father, being generous. All of these, you can go back, it's on page 46 if you want. These are all fresh air pleasures. And these are to be developed, to be cultivated. So you don't have to fear these type of pleasures. We can consider these the pleasure of renunciation. So all of these are good to go. You can just pick one of them and just keep doing it and just getting more and more refined at these wholesome pleasures. So that's the pleasure or the happiness that comes from wholesome senses of pleasures, which is like fresh air. Then we've got getting to more subtle types of pleasure. We've got pleasure which is like space. Pleasure which is like space. And this is In Pali, we might call it vipassana-sukha. So it's the sukha, or the happiness, that comes from clear seeing. And this type of pleasure isn't dependent on conditions. It's a type of equanimity that we can practice in meditation and through our daily lives, which isn't bothered by things we don't like. When there's sounds like all the cars going by that we don't like, this vipassana-sukha, this sukha which is like empty space, it's not burdened by those. There can be this sense of well-being that can come from just being someone who knows how to be equanimous, who knows how to get this metta sense of well-being with a single T, to be able to lift the mind up, to say, actually, I don't have to be bothered by the things I dislike or be agitated and compelled by the things I do like. There can be this coolness, or this spacious sense of well-being, this spacious sense of happiness, which can come from clear seeing. And you can sit a meditation retreat, a vipassana course, and that's what you're actively training in. You're looking at the sensations in the body, and if it's pleasant, or if it's painful, or if it's neutral, you just note it. You just note it. You're practicing clear seeing, vipassana, this spacious mind. The Buddha gave a simile that it's like someone trying to paint in empty space. So suppose there was someone who was to come up with red dye and black dye and yellow dye and orange paint and all these different colors, and was to say, I'm going to paint the sky with this paint. What do you think? Would that person be able to paint the sky? The Buddha asked this question. It's somewhat rhetorical, but the answer is no. The answer is no. You can't paint the sky because there's nowhere for the paint to land. And this is like the mind, which is like empty space, when you're able to cultivate this inner sense of resilience, this inner sense of equanimity, of patthana. We talk about the satipatthanas, or the foundations of mindfulness. Literally, it means the mindfulness which is well established. It's standing. It's in space. It's not bothered by agreeable things or disagreeable things. It's got this equanimity. So this is the pleasure. This is the sukha, which is like empty space. And we do have to train in that, but it's a much more reliable level of sukha and happiness once you know how to shift the mind into this. Once you know how to lift the mind into this, you can do it more and more reliably in the face of more and more difficult situations. Situations which in the past you would have been compelled to yell at your spouse or yell at your kid. Now you're able to shift into this spacious sense of well-being, this equanimity that says, okay, I don't have to respond, and I don't actually even have to be bothered. And there's a well-being, there's a pamoja, this well-being, this gladness. It's actually a sense of gladness, even when there's something which is disagreeable, like the sounds of cars going by when we're trying to meditate. This spacious sukha can just lift above that and say, oh, doesn't have to be a problem. Like empty space. You know, the heart can be like empty space. And people, even if someone comes and has the desire to ruin our day, hey, I can be empty space. And Buddha actually taught his son, he says, Rahula, train your heart to be like empty space. So we can all do that ourselves. The fourth type of sukha is the sukha, the happiness, the pleasure. And sukha really does mean both happiness and pleasure. And this fourth type of sukha is one which does take more training. It's one which perhaps most of us can't necessarily access right off the bat. But the more we train, say if you go to a meditation retreat where you've got quite optimal conditions, where there is a lot of quiet, where there is very few sense impingements, when the mind really can settle, when there aren't all the things which habitually stirring us up. When those aren't there, we can experience this pleasure, which is jhana-sukha, or the sukha, the pleasure, the happiness, which is like water. The happiness which is like water. And we call these Jhana-sukhas, sukha like water, because that's when the Buddha was describing these. He gave similes for each of the 4 jhanas, which it's the first 3 jhanas, speak about similes of water. So the first jhana, which is defined as the mind which is quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, one enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, and the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. The rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. And here we really are talking about states which more and more you can identify as pleasure. And the rapture will scale. The commentaries talk about different types of rapture. You have rapture, which is like waves just lapping onto the shore in high tide. You've got rapture, which is actually like almost lifting the body. It feels like you're meditating. You've got the rapture of horripilation, the rapture of goosebumps. The rapture of goosebumps, just this cool feeling which just pervades, drenches, steeps, fills, and pervades the body. And these are states of mental calmness, mental stillness, mental singleness, which we can train in. In essence, jhana is a profound mental ease, which is blameless, which is uncomplicated, and which is trainable. So it's a trainable, uncomplicated, profound mental ease. And we have to train at it. So it's quite possible that, maybe we've only had glimpses of this in our life. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean we can't get better at it. And the Buddha actually did say that we can train in jhana. We can train at getting better at this watery pleasure. The second jhana simile is just like lotuses that are born underwater, and their stalk is just drenched, steeped, filled, and pervaded with water. And the leaves are drenched, steeped, filled, and pervaded with water. And the flowers themselves are drenched, steeped, filled, and pervaded with water. So too, you drench, steep, fill, and pervade the mind, pervade the heart with this happiness which is born of concentration. And then the third jhana is a simile which is like a pool of water in the forest which has no inlets and just is totally provided with new cool water from below. So actually that's the second jhana, so switch those two similes. But at any rate, we've got these really cool, watery, and quite profound, a very deep spring of wellness that we can learn how to tap into. So that's the pleasure of jhana, the pleasure of water. And we can train in that, and the Buddha said we can train in that. And the fourth type of pleasure is the pleasure or the sukha, which is like earth, which is so firmly rooted. It's the pleasure of the paths and fruition. So the path is we're talking about actual attainments. So in Theravada Buddhism, actually in any Buddhism, we've got different levels of enlightenment, which really are categorically different states of mind, which are you don't backslide. Once you've realized this state, it's a period, it's a point in time. You realize this at a point in time, and then from then on out, the mind will be free from certain mental defilements or mental afflictions, such as doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, attachment to rites and rituals, and even desire and aversion. And the more we're able to practice and attain these different paths and fruitions, then the mind can completely transcend greed, anger, and eventually delusion. So this is a pleasure and a happiness which is like the earth. It's like the earth. Something totally different, but utterly rooted. You've reached bedrock. You've reached something which is absolutely solid in life. And most of us haven't reached that either. But again, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean we can't cultivate it. Buddha said, this is a type of pleasure which can be cultivated and pursued and developed. So we've got 5 types of pleasure, this 5-element taxonomy of pleasure. Pleasures like fire, which are sensual pleasures, all of the, the sweaty and, kind of just addictive and obsessive types of pleasures, which really just keep us utterly spun around ourselves and utterly unfree. And probably many of us have experienced even coarse levels of that type of fiery happiness, fiery pleasure. And the Buddha said, if there wasn't some type of gratification in sensual pleasures, then people wouldn't become addicted. People wouldn't fall for sensual pleasures, the beautiful sight, sound, smells, taste, touch of the world. But because there is some pleasure in these things, people do fall for them. And he said, why is that? It's because it's as if our senses, our faculties are not yet clear. It's as if not yet seeing with clear faculties. He actually gave a pretty vivid fire-based simile. So at the time of the Buddha, there were people with leprosy, Hansen's disease, where you basically lose feeling in parts of your body. This is in the Magga-phala. People lose senses in parts of their body. And then when you don't have sense, then you might get a scar on there that might get infected, and then actually get more and more infected to the state of actually having to be amputated. And at the time of the Buddha, before a limb would have to be amputated, people would actually take a firebrand and just burn their skin, cauterize their skin to get rid of, all the things which are feeding off of their necrotic, their decaying body part. And the Buddha said, why do they do that? Why do they burn themselves? And the answer is because there is some measure of satisfaction that the leper gets from burning this necrotic skin. But when they're healed from their leprosy, and nowadays there are very good cures for leprosy, when someone is cured, would they burn their body? No. Why not? Because their faculties, they no longer see the gratification there. They just see the pain in it. So fortunately, the pleasure of fire is not the only type of pleasure there is. We've got these other 4, the pleasures of wholesomeness, the pleasures which are like fresh air, like going out to the forest, like spending time with good friends, like having Dhamma talks with good friends, like being generous, like having a sense of integrity. This is pleasure which is like fresh air. Do it, and do it a lot, and develop it, and cultivate it, and just get better and better. We've got a list of 38 different types of wholesome fresh air sukha. It's on page 46. Don't be ashamed to look it up. You can look at your books. This isn't a closed book test. So many types of pleasure. Second type of fresh air pleasure. The third type of pleasure is pleasure which is like space. And once we learn how to tap into this vipassana-sukha, the sukha of clear seeing, this meta-awareness that says, actually, I don't have to be bothered by things I don't like. I don't have to be bothered by things I don't like, by words that are disagreeable and that I don't like, by annoying people. I can be like empty space. We can train the heart to be like empty space. This is vipassana-sukha. And you really can train the mind to just flip into this mind that's like space. The fourth type of sukha does take more work, but it does exist. And if you haven't experienced it, or if you've only experienced it minorly, then no worries. Go to retreats, take a 7-day retreat, take time off work, do a 10-day retreat. This is what utterly changed my life. I was 20 years old and did my first 10-day vipassana retreat. The first 2 days, they were hell. First 3 days were hell. Just so much dukkha, just utterly uncontrollable mind, and just, okay, I know I'm supposed to watch the breath, but I just can't do it. And it just feels like I'm battling an army of animals in the mind. And then third day, for whatever causes and conditions, I've been trying to pay attention more and more, one single object. I'm not yet a monk, but third and a half, fourth day, I experience a sense of pleasure and happiness, kind of born from that seclusion. And in our tradition, our teachers they say, you got to be careful about the labels that you put on your meditation. So if you think you're experiencing rapture and pleasure, one-pointedness, directed thought, evaluation, those are the 5 factors of jhana, just put a sticky note on that, okay? This feels like rapture. This feels like profound joy. Okay, sticky note. I'm not going to say for sure I had jhana or I have jhana, but this is an unworldly, profound mental ease, which is blameless and it's uncomplicated and it's trainable. I have been doing something with my mind for these first 2.5, 3 days, and then the mind settles into this trainable, uncomplicated, blameless, really profound mental ease. So go to a retreat. Go to a retreat. That's the pleasure, which is like water. It's super cool. And then when you experience something like that, you just have a totally different perspective on all the other. You really see how hot and bothered all your other sources of addiction and pleasure are. It's like I had to give up my phone, and it was 2002, so my phone wasn't that exciting at the time. But at any rate, gave it up and didn't have music, didn't have books. And I was devoid of all the sources of pleasure, which I was so, really lending my life towards, inclining my life towards just a normal life of those kind of pleasures, because that's what our societies tell us is possible. What's possible is, maybe a middle-class existence with, you go to see a movie every once in a while and you get good food, as much as possible, and you have, smelly stuff, in a good way around your house, and, soft touches, and everything is just comfortable. And that's all we know. And there's a phrase in psychology, which is induced delusional problem, or something like that. Another name is folie à deux, induced delusional disorder, induced delusional disorder. So this is folie à deux, which is the folly, which is two, the folly of two. And here we don't just have one other person who's encouraging us towards the folly of keeping our bar just this high. The best you can want in this life. Just, a middle-class existence, I get good food, and then I go see, it's a good movie, and other people said it's a good movie. The bar is this high. And the folie à deux, all the deux, all the others in this situation, is our whole society, is the advertisement industry, is the beautification industry, is the entertainment industry, which are telling us this much is okay. This is about as good as life can get. But then when you sit a meditation retreat and you realize that actually there are types of pleasure which are just of a totally other order, which are like water compared to all that heat and sweaty and grindy, and it's just like fire, and it's trainable. There's a trainable, uncomplicated, blameless, profound mental ease which is possible, but you have to train at it. And when you train, eventually there are these states of of pleasure like earth, which are the paths and fruitions of attainment. And so that's the 5-part elemental taxonomy. And you can just choose your pleasure for number 2 on up. See if you can lean away from, if you're relating to sight, sound, smells, taste of the world in a healthy way, you're not addicted, you're going out, you're being generous with it, giving, beautiful sight, sound, smells, taste, touch to others. That's, there's nothing inherently evil about that, but incline towards these other states of well-being, which are just cleaner, like fresh air, like water, like space, like earth. In the provocative and consequential question, which I was thinking that I would ask about 15 minutes ago, is, do you believe in jhana? Do you believe in jhana? Do you believe that there is this trainable, uncomplicated, blameless, really truly profound mental inner ease, or not. And this is a belief. And there's a sutta where the Buddha says there are some people who have the belief that this is not possible, that there is no jhana sukha. And there are other people who have the belief there is jhana sukha. And the people who believe it is possible to have these higher types, more refined types, less harmful, better types of pleasure, sukha, happiness, people who believe in that will incline their mind in that direction. And there's a great phrase, which is, the more you visualize that which may appear impossible to achieve, and the more you increase your positive expectation of achieving it, the greater the chances you are of achieving that type of pleasure. So if you've never heard about Jhana-sukha, you've never even thought about a pleasure that's better than all the fiery pleasures, well, now somebody said it. Now you've heard it. And what do you believe? Do you believe in jhana? And on one level, it's just a belief. And it is possible, whether you believe in it or not, if you put in the causes, if you sit, if you allow the mind to settle, if you focus the mind in a particular way, whether or not you believe in it, if you put in the causes, you will settle into jhana. But believing in it, the more frequently you visualize that which may appear impossible to achieve, and the more you increase your positive expectation of achieving it, the greater the chance you have of doing so. That is a cause. So putting that cause in, do you believe in it? And we're not asking you, well, maybe later on we say, okay, it's good, belief in rebirth, that is the thing in Buddhism, but we're not even saying that today. A much easier belief. Can a human mind attain a pleasure which is like water, which is cool, which is easeful? Don't you just want to believe that? Even if you don't believe it, don't you want to believe it? Rhetorical question, but please answer for yourselves and at least give some thought to it, because it is a belief. And there is this attractor states. Our society, this induced delusional disorder, has told us there's nothing higher, but you can choose. Okay, maybe there is. And the more you hang out with people that believe this is how you change beliefs in yourself or others, is sustained exposure to counter evidence over time. Sustained exposure to counter evidence over time. So the more you hang out with people who believe in this, or better than that, who can actually experience these types of better, cleaner happiness, then the more you might start believing in it. And you go to a meditation retreat and you start experiencing this, it could change your whole life, your whole trajectory, away from the fires and towards the waters and eventually the cool land. So all in the talk right there.
Han tamayang tamakatha satu karang taramase. Satu, 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 anumodami.
If anybody has any questions, either online or in person, Sarah's got the mic and she can pass it to people. So Luis, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the talk, Ajahn. It was really beautiful. Can you please speak a little bit more about that sukha that is like space? Is that like a mental state one can go like mentally, or is it the realization of no self, or how does that work so to not be touched by the reality?
Yeah, great question. And it's both. It can be seen as an outgrowth or a realization into not self. You're just taking this. In Zen, they talk about taking the backward step. So rather than living from face, one starts living from space. You start being less and less, vectored forward, which all of us have become compelled and obsessed to do for most of our lives because our eyes are pointing this way and not that way. But yeah, it's a stepping back. It's a meta-awareness. It's an insight into not self. And there are different levels. There are different levels to it. And I do think, you have some whole schools of Buddhism, like Dzogchen or Zen, and there comes this whole conversation about gradual path versus instantaneous path. And so for the most part, Theravada, we are a gradual path, talk about gradual path, gradual fruition, but there are these moments of instantaneous kind of awakening. And in Dzogchen, or Zen, it might say, just in a snap, you can do a glimpse. You can just glimpse a shift of awareness, which is actually not super deep. It's just a simple backward step, which is actually quite superficial, but so superficial that you might miss it. It's like, okay, awareness is like this. Awareness is vast. Everything, it's not so much that the mind is in the body, but that the body is in the mind. Yeah, the body is in the mind. My whole experience, your whole experience of the whole world is inside of you. My whole experience of the world is inside of me. It's not so much that the mind is inside the world, but the world is inside the mind. So it is this stepping back. There are gradations of it. You can get better and better at it and faster at it to a point where at first it is just like can feel like a backward step. Okay, I'm just going to be less obsessed, with allowing the aperture of my pupils, the aperture of my gaze, the aperture of my, social awareness to be so fixated on individuals, backward steps, peripheral awareness, spatial awareness that takes in the whole peripheries, out this much, out that much. About 160 degrees we can see. We can't see, actually, yeah. So big, wide spectrum of awareness. So at first it feels like just a backward step, just a little bit behind the eyes. Okay, there's not a homunculus, a little me behind the eyes. Sometimes it feels like that. I look down at the breath and it feels like the pupils are actually looking down. We don't live behind the eyes. So just, a little bit step back. And then the more skilled you can get at it, we're not talking about depersonalization but you can feel like it's a stepping back which includes the body. It's a stepping back which includes the body. And the better and better you get at it, then the less affected you'll be less and less a slave to liking the things that the mind wants to like and to not liking the things that the mind doesn't want to like. You just won't be a slave to that because on some level that's just kind of arbitrary. So you can become more skilled and have more choice. You've got more choice with this happiness, this pleasure of sukha. And just as I said, it's not super deep. It can be somewhat superficial. It can also feel like a somewhat superficial sukha. So it can be a very, very subtle sukha. Bhante Analayo talks about as soon as you realize, as soon as you have mindfulness, then there is a measure of well-being right there with that mindfulness. The Buddha says that when neutral feelings are dukkha, they're unpleasant when they're not known, but neutral feelings are actually pleasant when they're known. So when you bring mindfulness, when you have this spacious mind, and you know neutral feelings, it's actually pleasant. It's like attention rewards whatever you pay attention to. If you have skill in attention, then nothing is boring. Meditation is not boring. You're able to tap into this spacious type of well-being. And yeah, don't berate yourselves if you're not able to, zoom up to the top of the room right now and, look down and feel like you've got all this super space, but it might be just a little bit of remove. The tiniest bit of remove, I can step back a little bit. I don't have to be a slave. That's how it starts. I don't have to be a slave to the mind. Just a little bit of a step back. Yeah. And anatta, as you said. Yeah, not self. It's not self, it's not me. And it never was. That's why you don't have to wait for it. The truth of not self, you don't have to go and sit for 30 hours to see not self Not self is not self. There's no self right now. And we can get more and more, perspective on that, just deeper and deeper. So does that make sense?
And the question is about this belief system and other belief systems also, because there's like 100+ different belief systems, and statistically it's possible that only one system can be true, right? They cannot be all of them true. So having that, 1% or less. So the question is, how can you be sure that what we believe is actually true? Is there a way for like non-believer to kind of verify and kind of like observe that this is true? That's including like if there's reincarnation, including that there's like what exactly reincarnates, and that kind of things.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there is belief is something to look at and to try to understand how we relate to belief. What is our meta-belief, our belief about belief? And it's not necessarily the case that only one can be true. It's like there's an author who talks about the moral landscape, and you've got different religions or different philosophies who might just be talking about a totally different landscape. It's like the same map, it's the same ground, it's the same reality, but this religion, this belief system is just talking about over there. They're talking about France, and here we're talking about, Seattle, the Seattle area. So yeah, there can be overlapping levels of truth. And in Buddhism, we are looking for truths, for beliefs, which are not just useful. In some other forms of Buddhism, and certainly in other religions, they talk about useful fallacies. So like, or this term ubaya, which is used in other religions, or skillful means. Like you can, in other denominations, you might say, I can say lies as long as it's useful. But Theravada Buddha didn't do that. Everything purported to say by the Buddha is both useful and true. So how do we determine what's true? Well, you can start by looking, everything the Buddha taught was both useful and true. So it was both useful and true. So we can't totally determine absolute truth claims from the beginning, but we can get some immediate sense of, is this useful? Is it a useful belief to believe it is possible to attain jhana? And even more, the next question is, can I attain jhana? It is possible, this is a belief, it is possible for me to attain jhana. I can attain jhana. That's the next belief. And that, arguably, if you did that first step, you believe in jhana, it's a healthy belief to say, oh, I believe. Actually, yeah, it would be useful. It would be useful to believe I can attain that. Because it just sounds great, yeah? It sounds great, all these watery, cool pleasures. I read a great article this past week. It was called Belief Traps, Tackling the Inertia of Harmful Beliefs, by an author named Michael Schaefer you can look it up. Belief Traps. Belief Traps is the name of the article. And it is fascinating because there are these, even biologically, physiologically in the brain, the brain just keeps opting back, the nerves just keep going back to what they're used to. There are these attractor states. If we've never thought about jhana before, and then some monk asks, oh, is jhana real? You might think, oh, that's an interesting question. But then since our whole society, for our whole lives, has been never even mentioned the word absorption, meditation, jhana, we've just never heard it. So we leave here, and the attractor state is just to forget about it, just to fall back into this unexamined, arguably, if not harmful, certainly limiting. I mean, I felt when attaining this type of peace during that meditation retreat before I became a monk, I'm like, I'm 20 years old. I would have felt this. Why didn't somebody tell me about this? I'm a 20-year-old man. I'm a grown man. Why didn't somebody tell me? So examining your beliefs, and first saying, is it useful? And then whether it's true or not, here's a cool test. So with a cubit zirconium, like a fake diamond, the closer you look, the faker you realize it is. A jeweler looks at a cubit zirconium, or even a better fake diamond, and they look close. They don't even have to look that close, and they're like, fake diamond. Whereas a real diamond, the closer you look, the realer and realer it becomes. The more you go, oh, this is a real diamond. This is a real diamond. This is a 2-carat diamond, or this is a 24-carat diamond. Whatever it is, I don't know my carats. But yeah, just look and keep testing it, and be somewhat skeptical of both sides. You know, we don't want to be a fool. The Buddha didn't tell us to be a fool. He said, do examine these things, but do also listen to what other people say, what other teachers say, and weigh those things with your own experience and see, do you have any proof that jhana is not real? No. Nobody has proof that jhana is not real. Just because you might not have ever experienced it, that's not proof that it doesn't exist. Maybe we just haven't put in the causes. Do we have any proof that the sukha, the pleasure of space, isn't real? Hopefully you've experienced some level of that, but yeah, I would definitely recommend that article, Belief Traps. It's great, because we do get stuck in these belief states. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. The idea of is a belief useful? I think that's really helpful, because we may not know if it's true, but if it's useful, that's important. And I recall hearing Joseph Campbell say, you know, he found believing in reincarnation was useful. It was helpful. You can't prove it to be true, but it is helpful to have that belief. And so one thing I wanted to just ask you, if you could clarify a little bit more the earth, the sukha of earth. I think what I heard you say is that it's fruition, it's the path, it's like the achievement, but I need a little bit more clarification.
Yeah, in Theravada Buddhism, it really is like a finish line, and that might even seem too video gamey to you. It's like, and the Buddha does talk about 4 different levels of this. It sounds even more video gamey. There is a finish line, but that's how the Buddha taught in the Theravada canon, and there are teachers historically and living teachers who talk about this as an achievable goal. There's an inline, like all the things of the world, especially all of those fire-based sukhas, but even the sukhas that are like fresh air, there's no end. There's no end to these. Whereas the path, there is an end. There is an end to the path. There is goal. There is arhatship, in which, yeah, there is a final, really true transcendence of greed, anger, and delusion. And again, this is, as you said, it's a belief. You know, I don't have personal evidence. I have not experienced that for myself, but I've met people who I do believe have attained that. There was a moment in time when teachers who I respect really did achieve some level of true mental breakthrough, when their hearts kind of flipped and there was no way that they could, go back to former bad habits of body, speech, and mind. And I believe in that, and at the very least, I think it's a useful belief. It makes us, at least at the very least, harmless, and at the very most, it can, lead to greater and greater, more and more profound, subtle levels of happiness and well-being. So that it really is a point in time. And other schools of Buddhism will say, actually, that's not, the Buddha didn't talk about it like that. Awakening is right here, right now, all the time. Awakening is right here, right now, all the time. And very much, that is the sukha of empty space. And for people who, maybe have achieved some very, very extremely deep level of that happiness like space, it is their level of spaciousness, their mental spaciousness is very spacious. And that is happiness here and now. But it might not necessarily, they might still have more work to do. They might still have greed, anger, and delusion, like welling in their heart, called underlying tendencies. So, and you do see that people kind of who are purported to be attained or enlightened, and they go and do all this jerky stuff and violent stuff and, immoral stuff and, sexually licentious stuff, and it's just like, enlightened? Come on. Like I want like a better type of enlightened than that. So, yeah. Actually, can we go? There's someone back there. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. As lay practitioners, is there a way to cultivate a wise relationship with arts and entertainment? And a reflection that I've had is, sometimes I can feel this clinging of wanting to watch the next episode, go to the next show, and it feels like dukkha. And there are times where I feel like I experience awe or a sense of inner being or like spiritual experiences with art and entertainment. So I'd love your advice on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that might be the last question for today, but wonderful, wonderful question. And really, for lay people, all 5 of those types of pleasures, all of those last 4 are very much on the table. It is possible for lay people to achieve jhana. It is possible for lay people to achieve certain levels of enlightenment. It is certainly possible to have that spacious sukha, that spacious ease. And that second type, like this is where art kind of bridges the line between the sukha of fire and the sukha of fresh air. It's not always so clear. It can almost be like an intention. Like the intention is what changes it. If I'm watching the next Netflix series totally for myself and, totally in like a compelled and obsessive way, then that just feels hot and I don't want to do it. But if I watch it because, even just the thought while I'm watching it, even if before that was like, I really want to watch the next series, just in a thought, I also want to watch it because my partner is watching it, and so that I can talk about it kindly to my friends, have a good relationship with my friends. And on the level of art, for sure, Ajahn Nisabo, my fellow monk, he very much is a lover, like the lover archetype, and he very much feels that for a lot of monastics, in these Jungian archetypes, there's a lot of space for warrior monks. There's a lot of space for, what other type of archetypes do we have? We've got magicians. There are magician monks. There are a lot of, but there's not so much space for the lover type monks. How do monks do art? So he actually created a website called The Fourth Messenger, which was all monastic art. And really, we've both seen that. We've been in robes, living at monasteries for 15, 20 years. And in our tradition, you don't have to take robes for life. So people disrobe all the time. And oftentimes people will leave the robes because they don't have a way to channel that art. They just hear, there's this fiery sukha that you just need to be afraid of. But if you can channel that, like make art as a gift, make that Amazon order, but rather than ordering for yourself, put your friend's name in there. Just taking that fiery sukha and blending it into the sukha of fresh air is really just it can be an intentional game, and you can just get better and better. Extend those wholesome intentions, and do art for more and more of the right and clean and onward leading ways that are just supportive of what they call in Thai namchai, the water of the heart, because we want this path to be sustainable. Like if you hear a monk say, you need to be afraid of the fire, the sukha, the happiness of fire, and that's all there is, or, just full-on meditation, that's all there is, then a lot of people just leave. Whereas, you can just incline, there can be this inclining of the heart, inclining of intention, getting better at seeing what's holding us back, and that's the fire, and leaning in these freer ways. So, I hope if you do Dhamma art, would love to see it sometime, bring it. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.